Hello out there in Kinkland. This is Kink Candid. Shay here.
And Shay.
And we are touching on what may be a slightly loaded, controversial topic, but one I think is important.
Let's be honest here, hon. Anytime we get into a topic, we've got 6 rounds and 1 in the chamber. They're all loaded.
We are a little bit controversial here at Kink Candid. We're not afraid to say exactly what we think.
And, to anybody who will listen, and most people
don't. And if you don't like it, well, there are other shows you can listen to. That's largely been my philosophy on the matter. We provide our perspective, and that's what we do here.
Not to stick my head in the lion's mouth, but we are entitled to our viewpoint.
So, as my co-host here eloquently brought up, that's our topic for this evening: entitlement. Entitlement in kink, entitlement in BDSM. Because I see this come up a lot, and I see a lot of different issues that come up repeatedly. There are several that I can think of off the top of my head that come up repeatedly, and they all boil down to entitlement. That's the core issue. And we'll go through some of the examples, and then I'd like to kind of talk about why this is such a huge problem, why entitlement is so bad when it comes to what we do. So first, the examples. And I was telling Jay before we got on the air about this, because as we talked about multiple times on the show, I'm active on social media. And as such, I get a certain viewpoint available to me that might otherwise not be. And I follow some forums and pages and things of that nature where I see some of the common issues that are coming up in the community. And there are 3 or 4 that I see come up a lot. The first is the concept of, and this happens from both DOMs and subs, so let's put that out there before we go any further, that the first issue that I see come up a lot is, I want to do X activity. My partner, my kinky partner, my dom, my sub, what have you, has expressed point blank that they are not interested in doing this thing. And the sense of, I'm entitled to be angry at them, or I'm entitled to try and convince them. I see it come up a lot with things like breath play or impact play. Or degradation, humiliation play comes up a lot too. I want to humiliate my sub, or I want to be degraded by my dom, and they're not interested. How can I convince them? How can I talk them into it? How can I ease them into it?
And our answer invariably is, you don't. You're more than welcome to. No, go ahead. You're good.
You're welcome, and I want to be very clear that there's nothing wrong with bringing up, I have an interest in doing X thing. We fairly recently at my house, got into pet play, kitten play, and it was something that I was interested in, and I was absolutely within my rights, within the relationship, to bring up to him and say, I'd like to do this. I'd like to explore this. And thankfully, in my case, the answer was, I think that sounds fantastic. Let's explore that. But if the answer had been, I don't like that, I don't want to do that, then I should respect that and say, okay, well, I guess that's not a thing we're going to do.
Yeah. Just because it's a thing that one partner in a relationship has an interest in does not automatically mean they're entitled to force their opposite number to experience it. You can bring it up, you can talk about it, you can communicate your viewpoint, and that's really as far as it goes. I mean, once there's been communication on the issue and one partner has said unequivocally that no, they are not interested in exploring this particular activity or experience, then that's really as far as you're entitled to take it.
This comes up a lot again within relationships on the aftercare issue, which I will be point blank, outside of the sort of physical lotion and cream or what have you for any physical effects of what we do. I am not an aftercare kind of girl. I don't generally need it. If you need it, you are entitled to communicate that to your partner. You are also entitled to not play with someone whose vision of aftercare doesn't match your own. What you are not, in my opinion, and I will let Jay speak on this too, but what you are not entitled to do is tell your partner, I am absolutely entitled to the amount of aftercare I want, in the way that I want, when I want it, and if you don't want to do that, then I'm going to play with you anyway, but then I'm going to tell everyone what a horrible person you are for not giving me what I needed.
Yeah, no. That's not the thing. Aftercare and those sorts of things should be discussed and delineated before play begins, agreed on before play begins. If you can't come to a middle ground on an issue like that, then don't play. Find another partner.
If my version of aftercare involves, 5 hours of cuddling and coddling and taking care of me, and my partner's version of aftercare involves half an hour of talking the scene out and then moving on, I am entitled to negotiate. Can you do more than that? Is that the absolute limit for you? I'm entitled to say, I'm not going to play with you because what you're going to provide is not what I'm looking for. What I'm not entitled to do is say, okay, fine, and then play, and then say, oh,
bitch about it for a week and a half.
Yeah, they were so terrible. They didn't take care of my needs. I'm also not entitled to say, I didn't tell you what I needed in terms of aftercare. I didn't discuss it ahead of time, and now I'm angry that you didn't read my mind.
Yeah. Let me stop you there for a second, because you brought up something that I feel I need to make point blank and period. Being a dom, whether female or male or transgender or what have you, being a dom does not make us mind readers. This is not a thing. Now, after a relationship has progressed for, a dozen years, and each partner knows one another implicitly, then it may occasionally feel like, we're telepathic and we understand what our sub needs before they can speak it, because we know them. We've been through, half a lifetime of experiences with them, and we know how they're going to react. We know what they're going to need and what makes them comfortable and what makes them uncomfortable. Sometimes we even know how much of a certain thing they can tolerate before it becomes uncomfortable. But it doesn't make us telepathic. If you can't express on your own what it is you need before or after a scene, then you're not entitled to, expect us to simply pull it out of the ether for you. That's not how this works.
And I think the other one that I see come up a lot is kinky people. My dear listeners, kinky people. For the love of all that is holy, stop getting into relationships knowing you are kinky with known vanilla people, and then being upset and coming to the rest of us and asking for advice on how to convert your vanilla partner.
Oh, God. Can we not?
Can we seriously stop doing this? Because it never ends well, first of all. And secondly, and this is what bothers me so much about it, is that it's never, I brought it up to my boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, what have you, and they were interested but unsure and don't know anything about it. How can I help me figure out how to explain it to them in a way that's going to make sense so that they can figure out whether or not they want to do it? That's fine. Honestly,
I won't say never, because I've seen that. I've been asked that.
Okay.
But it rarely lately in the social media is this a thing that we say. Usually it's, I'm kinky, my partner is not. How do I convince them to explore this with me?
That's more often, yes, that's very true. That's more often what I see. If you want to come and ask people, help me figure out how to explain this to my partner in a way that makes sense because they're curious but unsure, that is absolutely fine, and I'm more than willing, and so are most of the rest of us out there, more than willing to help you figure out how to put it into words so that they can understand. But if what you're saying is, I like to be spanked and choked, and I brought it up to my partner, and my partner doesn't like doing those things and has point blank said, I don't want to do these things, how can I ease them into it? Well, you cannot.
You don't. You shouldn't. Please stop.
Just stop doing that. Also, and this one is specifically for the subs out there.
No.
I've seen this one come up recently. Dominant folk are not immediately entitled by virtue of identifying as a dominant to a level of control that you have not specifically negotiated with them.
No.
I saw someone come online asking about whether or not this was a quote-unquote red flag, which is a term we've talked about on the show and I despise for many reasons. But
we try desperately not to use it.
I try and avoid the term because I think it's well overused. But at any rate, this person said, I talked to a Dom online, and within a few hours, this Dom was asking for their FetLife login info, telling them they should move in with them when they graduated from college, telling them they want them in their life forever, telling them they should set up a new Gmail account and give this dominant person their login information so they could set up the photo backup to Gmail, and then they'd have access to all photos on your, on your phone, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Please advance rapidly in the opposite direction.
This was my advice. I told this person, look, I'm not going to use the term red flag because that's a term I don't like and I rarely use it. However, what I will tell you is this. I am an owned, collared slave. I am married to my master. He does not choose to exercise that level of control after years together. The fact that this person wants that level of control before you've even agreed to be theirs, within a few hours of talking to you for the first time, haven't even met you in person yet, that concerns me. It is too early.
That's not dominance, that's the opening to abuse.
And so, no, the dominants are not entitled to anything and everything they want from the minute they say, hi, I'm a dom, either.
And then please, to our dominant friends, if this is what you think dominance is, go and learn some more, because you're doing a severe disservice to the rest of us.
It's not an appropriate way to act. And, at this point in my life, could my master have access to any and all passwords and things of that nature? Absolutely. He certainly could. He does not choose to because that's an awful lot of work. But,
and as we've discussed before, your master isn't the micromanaging type. He has a life he would like to lead.
It's not his style, but he could. But he didn't take that minute one. We have built a relationship that would allow for such things. And so, no, you're not entitled to full control of a submissive even the first time you talk to them for the first time, and they're not even your submissive yet. You haven't even met them yet in person. No, you are not entitled to this. Now, we're going to talk about two more topics that are going to be the controversial ones. Everything I've said so far, pretty non-controversial, with the possible exception of converting to vanilla folk. which apparently is a controversial position these days, but that's neither here nor there. These last 2 points on this topic are controversial. I fully admit this, but they need to be said. First, I want to speak to our poly friends. If you are polyamorous, and that is important to you, being able to have more than one partner matters to you, you should absolutely be upfront about this, of course. However, if you, as a poly person, make a concentrated, a conscious choice to get into a relationship with someone who has point blank told you they are not poly, you are not entitled to get into a relationship with a monogamous person expecting that they will change their mind on this topic and then be angry at them when they don't. To my monogamous friends, the same is true in reverse. You are not entitled to get into a relationship with someone who has point blank told you they are polyamorous and then be angry when they don't suddenly become monogamous because they are with you. People
that
are
one
who
I
they
can. That one I can speak to. I had a relationship which, thankfully, never progressed beyond online. I had a relationship with an individual who I grew quite close to. And then after knowing who and what I was and what I was into and the type of person I was, said, I'm really not comfortable with you having other partners. I'm really not comfortable with this. It hurts me every time I think about it. And I said, why did you not say this ahead of time? Why is this a conversation we're just having now after months? Because I thought that maybe you would change. No. Please. Do not get into a relationship ever. Kinky, vanilla, straight, gay, monogamous, poly, any type of relationship ever, expecting that you can change your partner simply by the virtue of the gloriousness that is you. This is not a thing that happens. Okay. It may occasionally happen in I don't know, rom-coms or trashy romance novels. But in my experience, it is not a thing that happens in actual life. Or if it does, it is not a thing that happens in actual life that ends in either or both partners being happy. So please, please, don't do this.
That one came up because I saw it come up recently with a dom who is poly, got into a relationship with a submissive who is monogamous. I guess expecting that the monogamous submissive was going to change their mind. And the dom is like, how do I talk to them about this again? Because, we've talked about it before, but they've never accepted a poly relationship.
They're not required to.
It made me very angry because, in fact, I got into it in a discussion in the comment thread with someone who was like, well, I'm monogamous and my partner is poly and it works because I'm not trying to change them. She's not accepting who you are and that's not fair and that's a big red flag and it's not going to change. I'm like, well, you know what? She's accepting who he is just as much as he's accepting who she is. And the argument was, well, he was upfront that he's poly. And I'm going, yeah, and she was upfront that she was monogamous. And this idea that one is better than the other is the root problem, I think, there. It's a sense of, I am the better thing, and therefore I am entitled to try and change you into whichever thing I happen to be.
No, you're not.
And you're not. Monogamous people are monogamous. Poly people are poly. And the fact of the matter is that neither is wrong. Neither is better. They're just different. But if your partner tells you, I am poly, do not expect that you can somehow make them monogamous because you are the sun shines out of your butt. And the same is reverse. If you are poly and your partner is monogamous, do not suddenly think you're going to turn this monogamous person into a poly person simply because you're so amazing. People are who they are. And again, all these things that we've talked about so far are rooted in a sense of sort of entitlement. I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm entitled to try and talk you into being whatever thing that I am that you are not. Now,
no, you're not.
And it's dangerous, it's ugly, and it's nasty, and I don't like it at all. I think it's bad for the community. I think it's bad for the lifestyle. I think it's terrible one way or the other. Now,
and
I want
it's
to speak
bad
to
for people.
It is.
Lifestyle, community, otherwise. It's bad for the participants. It's bad for the people involved. It does emotional harm.
It does. And it's damaging to people. Please don't break people. Just don't. You are not entitled to break people. You just aren't. And I think that's the core issue. Now, I want to speak directly to my submissive period having people.
Oh, Lord.
I say that because I don't want to make this gendered because...
No, I get it.
I'm trying to be aware of that, but I want to speak to my submissive people and specifically my period having submissive people, however you may choose to identify. Having a period does not entitle you to squat. I say this as a period having submissive person. So, having a menstrual cycle, having a period, does not entitle you to anything. I have seen more than once submissives come in. I have, how do I explain to my dom that it's not my fault, I can't control myself, and I'm not being a bad submissive even when I'm rude to him and don't follow the rules. It's just that I don't feel like doing my tasks, and I don't feel like this because I have my period. And then I see the responses. And I stay out of these conversations. I stay out of these conversations because nothing I can say is going to go very well. But
how long did it take you? How long did it take you to learn that the best thing you could do was to stay out of the conversation?
Longer than it probably should have.
Okay, that's fair.
I have arrived at a point in my life.
And I'm gonna correct you slightly. It being a male gendered person, at least at the moment. And I say that this way because those of you who listen are probably aware that my daughter and I have come to the point where we refer to each other as gender fluid. And so, at least at the moment, being a male gendered person who lives in a house with more females than is probably wise, being submissive and having a period, at least in my house, entitles you to whine a little bit because it hurts and it's uncomfortable and it makes you grumpy, and I get that. In my house, also, it entitles you to copious amounts of chocolate. But that's about as far as I'm willing to. That's about as far as I'm willing to bend.
It certainly does not entitle, at least at my house or in most houses I've ever known, it does not entitle you to suddenly decide that the rules don't apply.
No.
It does not entitle you to decide that your tasks that you are normally expected to do not apply.
No.
And absolutely,
You are entitled to go to your dom and go, look, I'm hurting. Can we come to an arrangement that involves me doing these tasks on a day when I'm not hurting quite so much? This is permissible. At least, again, at least in my house. I don't want to speak for other doms. That's not what I got into this for. But at least in my house, one of my girls comes to me and goes, look, I'm hurting. I feel like the world's going to explode if I move my head the wrong way. I'm just not up to doing this thing today. Can it be done tomorrow when there is not a cataclysm behind my skull? This is an acceptable gambit. This is an acceptable thing. And usually the answer will be, yes, please go take whatever medication works for you and go hide in the dark.
And speaking of which, for some of us, I know that the hormonal changes around the cycle can create migraines. I'm one of those myself. And on a day when I am having a terrible migraine, it is absolutely permissible at my house to be like, listen, I'm hurting really bad. Like, if I move the wrong way, I may explode and or throw up at the same time. Can I push this until tomorrow when I feel less bad? And this is an acceptable thing at my house. What would not be acceptable at my house would be, I'm sorry, I'm not doing any of the normal things that I am expected to do around my house for the next week.
Because I am bleeding.
Right.
No.
This would not be an acceptable thing. Also, what would not be an acceptable thing at my house is you must, as the dominant partner in our relationship, accept the fact that I am rude and disrespectful, because it is not my fault, you see, because I am having my period and therefore I cannot control myself. Therefore, you should be accepting of my general rudeness for the next week.
No. You're an adult. You are a functioning human. You may occasionally feel like you are less functional than would normally be. However, rudeness is not countenanced, at least not in my house.
And whenever I see these posts come up, I generally stay out of them, because my response is going to essentially boil down to suck it up, buttercup. But, which is not super helpful, but, but I get these responses. I see these responses, and I see things like literally telling them, oh, just tell them if they're a good dom, they'll understand. They should be taking care of you this week, and yada, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm. Ow.
I do not like this one bit at all.
No. Please stop. It hurts.
And you are entitled to ask for some consideration from your dominant when you are feeling poorly.
Let me back that up and repeat. You are entitled to ask. You are not entitled to expect.
That is a distinct point that we thank you for highlighting that, because it is a distinct point. You are entitled to say to your dominant, hey, I am feeling really bad, whether it's your period or any other issue. I am struggling with X thing, cramps, migraine, just generally being
grief,
sick, what have you.
Grief,
stress, what have you. Whatever is going on, whatever you are struggling with at that moment. And you are entitled to go to your dominant, and you are entitled to say, can we talk about this? I am struggling with this thing. It is making it very difficult for me to do this or that thing that you expect of me. Can we talk about pushing it off to another day? Can we talk about adjusting what is expected of me while this is going on? Can we talk about it? You are not, however, entitled to lay back, say, I have my period, therefore you have no right to expect me to be respectful. You have no right to expect things of me. You are supposed to be taking care of me this week. this entitlement, you do not suddenly become incapable of being a functional human and treating people with respect for a week out of every month. And as a period-having person, as a cisgendered woman, it boggles my mind that we, as submissives, have come to accept this. That we have gotten to a point where we say things like that this is an acceptable thing, not just because it's rude to our dominance. No, because it is. Let's be clear.
Thank you.
It is not fair. It is not fair to our dominance to do that. But in addition to that, it's bad for us.
It sets up a bad habit, a bad precedent.
It does, and it feeds back into the mistaken idea that submissives are weak. And I don't know about any of my listeners out there, but let me tell you, this submissive, not weak.
I can testify to that.
I may be his kitten, but this kitten has claws. And I am in no way weak. And I know his wife, Jay's wife. I know her well. She isn't either. No matter what we may be dealing with, we are not, have never been, and will never be weak.
Not in my house.
This idea that we need to sit back and lay on our butts for a week every month because we just can't. No. Just no. No. I refuse to accept this. It's not weak to ask our dominant to help us out and take care of us when we are recovering from something major. Childbirth, surgery, a major illness, days when disabilities are bad. Those things are acceptable. But because you have cramps means you're rude to your dom for a week every month? No. Not okay. Just not.
Never will be okay.
And all of this collectively, all of these examples come back to this sense of entitlement. We, as a community, need to keep in mind that at the end of the day, dom, sub, man, woman, gender fluid, switch, whatever you happen to be, at the end of the day, we are human beings. And on that note, and it just occurred to me that I wanted to bring this up. I saw a question in a group, and I want your thoughts on this as a dominant. This person identifies as a submissive, is currently engaged in a fairly new and fairly, shall we say, casual arrangement as far as the lifestyle is concerned, which I have my own concerns about the validity, the wisdom of these sort of casual, we're not in a relationship kind of things, but
that's another topic for another week.
Leaving that aside for a moment, this person is engaged in a fairly new, fairly casual arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
This person has several significant health issues.
Mm-hmm.
This person believed and wanted validation and confirmation that it is acceptable to not tell their play partner about a couple of medical issues because their theory was it's too serious for a casual relationship and I'm pretty sure I can manage it and it's not like it won't likely come up during play, and even if it does, it's not that big a deal. I can handle it.
No. Okay. I'm going to break the fourth wall here for a minute. This is as dangerous, if not more so, than a certain friend of mine deciding, yeah, I'm allergic to chocolate, but I can handle it. It's only a mild anaphylactic reaction. I can handle it. No. No.
It is in fact.
You cannot.
It is in fact, for the record, dear listeners, not exactly an anaphylactic reaction. So I would like that noted for the record.
Stuff it, you. It's still dangerous. And so is getting into a relationship that involves the kinds of things that we do and not informing your partner that you have health risks that may get in the way of certain forms of play. It's dangerous, and it's unfair, and it violates one of the crucial tenets we hold here, because you're not communicating. So no, please don't do this.
Your desire to play does not outweigh the other person's need for informed consent.
And obviously, K9 agrees.
Yes. He feels the need to put his 2 cents in. Your desire to play with some person and in some way does not outweigh that person's desire and need and right to informed consent. Informed consent is huge in what we do, but consent doesn't count. And that's the reason that entitlement matters so much, because you're not entitled to withhold information from your partner, because that means that their consent is not fully informed. They did not have all of the information that they needed to be able to consent to whatever activity you were doing. The other thing that comes into play is we talk in sort of vanilla society, so to speak, about the issue of coercion as it relates to consent. If I say to a person, I wish to have sex with this person says, no, thank you. And I then spend the next several weeks, hours, days, weeks, months, whatever period of time, easing them into the idea, convincing them to do it. And I wear them down and I wear them down and I wear them down until eventually they say, okay, fine, whatever.
That's not consent. That's coercion.
And we talk a lot about that, and we recognize that as part of sort of rape culture, that if someone says that no to sex and then you badger them and coerce them and just badger them until they eventually are worn down and finally say, okay, fine. They didn't really consent to sex. Not really. And we recognize that in terms of sex. The same needs to be understood to be true as it relates to kink. If a dom says, I want to spank you, and you say, I don't really want to do that, and they spend the next several weeks trying to ease you into it and convince you and talk you into it, and eventually you say, okay, fine. It's not really consent. If you say, I want you to choke me to your dom, and he says, no, I'm not really comfortable with that. I don't like the risks. I don't want to do it. And you spend weeks and weeks and weeks talking him into it and easing him into it and doing all these things to convince him that this is the thing that he should do. When he eventually does it, did he really consent? No, not really.
No.
The law recognizes that if you, not everywhere, but the law in many locations, let me put it that way, recognizes that if
I'm going to stop you here and make it very clear to our audience that we are not legal professionals. We are not offering legal advice.
Thank you. Very important. We are
Please
not.
Continue.
But to my understanding as a non-lawyer, the law in many locations recognizes that if a person knows HIV and they are aware that they have HIV. And they withhold this information from a partner, and the partner consents to, say, unprotected sex based on that withholding of information. It can, as far as I am told, be charged as a crime in some locations because you didn't have the information that you needed to fully consent to the act. We should, I'm not talking about legally necessarily, because the law doesn't really recognize much of what we do in BDSM anyway, but we as a community need to understand that if you withhold valid, pertinent information from a partner, you are not giving them a chance to consent. They are consenting based on a lie. They are consenting based on information that you gave them that wasn't correct, that wasn't true. And we need to recognize that that's significant. That matters. And I don't think we often do. And I think we need to be better about that sort of thing.
I know of an individual, and I'm not going to come anywhere close to a name or a location, but I know of an individual who is spending a significant portion of his life in prison because a woman that he chose to play with stole her sister's ID, her older sister's ID, and represented herself when she decided she was willing and ready to play with this person, represented herself as of legal age of consent to make this choice for herself. As it turns out, in the state where they live, she was not. The male in this equation, because she chose to lie and withhold information, is now spending years of his life in prison. That's the type of risk you're taking for another person when you choose to withhold information, when you choose to not be upfront and honest about age, about your health, about risk factors that are pertinent and important when you choose to engage in the type of play that we do. No one has the right to make that kind of risk, to take that kind of risk for someone else. Don't do it.
And it's critical. It really, really is. It's absolutely critical that we recognize that this is a big, big deal. This is what we do. There are real risks in what we do. There always have been. There have always been risks in what we do. And there always will be. Nothing we do is 100% safe. That's just a fact. There are always risks. The only way to do what we do in any even remotely safe way is communication, informed consent, and a desire to know learn. Look into the things that you're going to do. But informed consent and communication are parts of them, and a sense of entitlement does not breed informed consent. It just doesn't. It can't. And that is why entitlement is so dangerous. It's not just wrong, it's dangerous in what we do. And we have to be aware of that as a community. And we have to start calling it out when we see it. No, you're not entitled to have your dominant or your submissive do whatever activity you want them to do just because it sounds fun to you. No, you are not entitled to coerce your vanilla partner into whatever it is you think you want to do. None of these things are acceptable. None of these things are okay. And all of these things are dangerous and damaging and just not acceptable. And we have to start saying that. We have to start telling each other as a community, no, that's not okay. No, that's not acceptable. No, you may not do that. No, you should not do that. There's very few things in this lifestyle that are firmly in the you should not camp. This is one of them.
We need to start, as a community, holding one another accountable. We need to stop enabling this pervasive sense of entitlement.
It's better for everyone. All parties, the community, the lifestyle, every human. Because let's just be real clear and remember that when we talk about these things. That dom, that sub that you're talking to online or about, that is a human being. They have thoughts, they have feelings, they have needs and wants. They're human beings, and you can hurt them. You can damage them. You can do all sorts of terrible things to them because you decided that your wants mattered more. Your wants never outweigh someone else's needs. And on that note, I think we're going to go ahead and cut our discussion here. I think we've covered it unless you have anything else you want to add.
I'll add the same thing I always try to add at the end of our episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for listening. Good luck and stay safe out there.
And stay kinky. Tune in next week for another Kink Candid episode, and we'll be touching on another topic.